and vehicles for their expression came about. And when we talk about Europe, we're talking about then more than a place. We're not talking about a continent, even a large continent that stretches from Asia to the Atlantic, from the North Sea down to the Mediterranean. We're talking about a set of memories that's part of the Western DNA. Moreover, we see that the political, social, economic, cultural history of Europeans has affected almost every aspect of the world's civilization. And it's done so through a variety of means. The obvious and most immediate, especially for those of us living in North America, are the emigrations of the 19th and 20th centuries in particular, but the contact that began at the end of the 15th. It was through contact, conversion, and emigration that so many of the ideas and institutions of Europe reached around the world. And this contact and this emigration brought ideas and memories that then took root in a different soil and allowed the opportunity of other places to benefit from European experience. In some instances, to reject them completely, in others to develop and to mature them. Moreover, Europe was a place that created and wrote and spread and extended ideas. Europe is a continent of ideas. Europeans are always discussing principles and how those principles should best be made manifest. As a result, the books that have animated Western civilization have spread, and some of the ideas in those books have taken root very, very deeply. When we think of communist China, for example, we must remember that communism is a European invention and is now the dynamic force that helped create the modern Chinese state. When we think of liberalism and democracy, we think of those principles that have animated so much of the free world. Consequently, Europe is a dynamic. It's a dynamic because it is driven by an energy of its own creation and also by an energy that can be applied at different times in different places. Because it was debate, it was argument over these fundamental principles that drove so many of the international relations and drove so many of those peoples around the world to either embrace or to reject things that happened in Europe. So European civilization put down deep roots, and the institutions where these flourished still live with us today and still to some extent define what it is to be a citizen of the planet Earth. So when we talk about institutions like parliamentary or representative democracy, we're talking about a set of principles that developed on the European continent in its earliest forms in the polis of ancient Greece, but also that then developed through the British parliamentary system and then through the 19th century manifestations of liberal elements of representational government to the creation of the concepts that really drive us in any free society. The rule of law, an independent judiciary, and those concepts that put the law above everybody, including the ruler of the state. Only in a free society can there be a law that pertains to everyone, regardless of power, wealth, or influence. And that, again, is one of the great gifts of Europe to the world. Social legislation, the sorts of ideas that are particularly European, and the instruments and the vehicles that were developed in order to put them in place and to give them a structure are particularly European. The idea then that the community owes much to the individual and that the individual owes much to the community is something that is profound and based upon the experience of Europe over a number of centuries. We will see in subsequent lectures how these ideas took deep root, beginning almost in those earliest years of European civilization. We'll see, in fact, how after the collapse of Rome, the idea of communal agriculture through feudalism, the idea of a manorial economy created a sense of community in which there were mutual responsibilities for the economy and society to work. There was a set of responsibilities that were both enshrined in law and then practiced in customs. This, in fact, is very much still part of the European imagination. The idea of this mutual responsibility and this mutual dynamic between the individual and the larger group, the collective, the state, the community, however you want to define them. And so many of the ideologies then that we'll be discussing later in this course really try and deal with this issue. What are the restrictions on the concept of individual human rights that allow the community to function? And then what are the necessary restrictions on the community to allow individual freedom to operate? These are the sorts of dynamics and challenges and debates that still exist, that still animate European political discussion, and as a consequence, help animate ours as well. Because these are not site-specific, depending on a continent